Open. When Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliacosm Sovereign Irised Light saw the mighty river of spacetime sweep towards their bodies. In their fear, they no longer hesitated and used their core powers. Kiliacosm Sovereign Irised Light unleashed a beam of light, which appeared like a rainbow. This beam of light seemed indestructible. No power and no supreme treasure could resist it. However, no matter how strong and indestructible the power of this beam of light was, it could not tear apart Lin Feng's river of spacetime. The power of spacetime transcended everything and was above all power. It was invisible yet ubiquitous. What Lin Feng was least afraid of was this kind of offensive core power. As long as it could not tear through the river of spacetime, it would not pose any threat to Lin Feng. Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet did not stay idle. His core power was a drop of blood. As soon as this drop of blood appeared, it quickly transformed into a vast ocean, a sea of blood. Anyone enveloped by the sea of blood, be it the supreme treasure or the Kiliacosm Sovereign, would be contaminated, and their movements would be slowed. Supreme treasures would be tainted, and they would not be able to unleash their true power at all. Boom! The river of spacetime landed hard. It was invisible and intangible, but what seemed like raging waves swept the two dignified four-cataclysm hegemons into it. Be it the sea of blood of Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet or the light of Kiliacosm Sovereign Irised Light, they were useless against the river of spacetime. The two of them were swept into the river of spacetime together, and their struggling figures could even be clearly seen. No. How can it possibly suppress two dignified four-cataclysm hegemons at once? All the four cataclysm hegemons have completed the transformation of their physiques. Their strength is simply incredible. Is the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign really that strong? The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign isn't that strong, but his river of spacetime is. If I'm not wrong, the true core of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign is actually the river of spacetime. He has already completed the transformation of his spacetime physique. Spacetime physique? What a terrifying physique. Gazes swept across the battlefield where the three hegemons were fighting. These gazes were all from Kiliacosm Sovereigns. However, at this moment, be it those three cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns or the four cataclysm hegemons, all of them were stunned. Even though they already thought very highly of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign would still give them a surprise every time. It was as if every once in a while, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign would cause a new commotion. But now, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign had even become a four-cataclysm hegemon. It was even very likely that he had a spacetime physique. Many Kiliacosm Sovereigns did not know what was so special about this spacetime physique. After all, they had never even come into contact with the power of spacetime, so how could they know about the spacetime physique? However, seeing that Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliacosm Sovereign Irised Light did not even have the slightest ability to fight back in front of Lin Feng, while the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign looked very relaxed, the disparity was evident. Relaxed. That's right, Lin Feng was indeed relaxed now. He was not pretending to be calm, but he was really relaxed without feeling any pressure. Originally, Lin Feng himself was already prepared to endure immense pressure. After all, those were two four-cataclysm hegemons. In the past, when dealing with entities at the same level, he would already feel a lot of pressure and a huge burden when suppressing one in the river of spacetime, let alone when there were two. However, when he swept Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliacosm Sovereign Irised Light into the river of spacetime, he was surprised to discover that it was very easy. There was not much pressure, nor was there as terrifying a burden as imagined. There was a burden, but it was only a little. To the current Lin Feng, it was almost negligible. So this is the spacetime physique? Lin Feng muttered softly. The first thing he thought of was the spacetime physique. After becoming a four-cataclysm giant, what really reshaped Lin Feng was the spacetime physique. In the past, Lin Feng had never understood the true meaning of the spacetime physique. He even felt that this spacetime physique was very ordinary. Without it, he could still use the river of spacetime. Then, what was the use of this spacetime physique? But now, Lin Feng understood the terror of the spacetime physique. Using the spacetime physique to activate the river of spacetime was exceptionally easy, reducing a lot of pressure. In fact, when facing entities of the same level, Lin Feng could easily activate the river of spacetime to suppress them. He would no longer feel much of a burden. This river of spacetime had truly become Lin Feng's unique trump card. Everyone could clearly see that in the river of spacetime, Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliacosm Sovereign Iris Light were constantly struggling. Their strength was considerable. Every strike was earth-shattering, and they even began to risk their lives in a frenzy. However, the more everyone looked at it, the more shocked they became. In the past, Lin Feng had only swept out with the river of spacetime before storing it back in his body. But now, he openly used the river of spacetime to suppress the two Four Cataclysm hegemons in front of everyone. Hence, everyone could clearly see the two Four Cataclysm hegemons struggling violently in the river of spacetime. However, no matter what methods the two Four Cataclysm hegemons used, they seemed to be in another space and could not affect the river of spacetime at all. Moreover, as time passed, the auras of the two Four Cataclysm hegemons quickly declined. In the end, they even fell to the level of 3 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. 3 Cataclysm, 2 Cataclysm, 1 Cataclysm. In the blink of an eye, the auras of the two Four Cataclysm hegemons had even fallen to 3-star supremacies, and they were no longer even Kiliacosm sovereigns. Moreover, they quickly reached the end of time and turned to ashes. 2 dignified Four Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns had fallen just like that. All the Kiliacosm sovereigns who had witnessed this scene with their own eyes felt their hearts palpitate deep down. They even felt a chill run down their spines. Although they had all heard of the terror of the principle of spacetime, very few of them had actually witnessed it. In particular, they saw with their own eyes how 2 dignified Four Cataclysm hegemons, not just any common person, but true giant-level hegemons, erased by the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign with such ease. That's right, they were erased. It was effortless and did not even pose any threat to the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. He simply used the river of spacetime to sweep them up, and waited quietly for the 2 hegemonial experts to be completely annihilated in the river of spacetime. There was no earth-shattering battle, nor was there any scene of brutality. It seemed so plain and uneventful, yet was all the more hair-raising for it. Swoosh! At this moment, ripples appeared in the void. Right on the heels of that, a familiar figure appeared in the void. Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart. When Lin Feng saw this figure, a smile appeared on his lips. This Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart received the news that Kiliacosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliacosm Sovereign Iris Light were coercing the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. Hence, he rushed over immediately. However, after he rushed over, he did not find the figures of the 2 hegemons. Instead, traces of their auras were left behind. With Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart's understanding of Lin Feng, when he saw the huge river of spacetime, he already had a guess. Looks like I'm late. Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart took a deep breath and shook his head with a weak smile. Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart, this way please. Lin Feng invited Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart into the Chaos Dojo. The gazes that lingered on the Chaos Dojo previously also disappeared. No one dared to spy on Lin Feng anymore. Even a 5 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign could not kill 2 Four Cataclysm hegemons with ease. Of course, this did not mean that Lin Feng was above the 5 Cataclysm hegemons. Instead, it meant that Lin Feng's special abilities could easily kill 4 Cataclysm hegemons. That was a huge deterrent to many Kiliacosm sovereigns. The current Lin Feng was no longer the 1 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign who had just become a Kiliacosm sovereign and could be manipulated at will. Instead, he had grown into a true hegemonial expert who could kill 4 Cataclysm hegemons and intimidate the entire medium Kiliacosm. Only at this moment could Lin Feng be considered capable of protecting himself. Although he could not be considered to have nothing to worry about, even a 7 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign could forget about killing him easily. Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart heaved a long sigh and said, "Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, I didn't expect you to be so powerful after becoming a 4 Cataclysm hegemon. The principle of spacetime is really miraculous." Kiliacosm Sovereign Sky Heart's hypothesis was correct. When he rushed to the Chaos Dojo immediately, he originally wanted to reinforce Lin Feng, but he did not expect that Kiliakosm's Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm's Sovereign Iris Light were already completely dead. They were already dead before he arrived. This shocked even Kiliakosm's Sovereign Skyheart. Although he knew that Lin Feng had killed Kiliakosm's Sovereign Imperial Gold back then, he had not seen it with his own eyes after all. Moreover, in the special environment of the Null Magus Forbidden Zone, there was a factor of coincidence. But now Lin Feng had publicly killed two dignified hegemonial 4 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns in the medium Kiliakosm in front of everyone. Even Kiliakosm's Sovereign Skyheart was stunned by such a shocking scene. Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, from today onwards, it seems like the number of Kiliakosm sovereigns coveting your principle of spacetime and the Chaos Dojo will decrease greatly. Kiliakosm's Sovereign Skyheart said with a smile. By the way, what's going on with Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star? Lin Feng took the initiative to ask about Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star. This 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign seemed to be interested in Lin Feng's principle of spacetime. Kiliakosm's Sovereign Prowling Dragon even took the initiative to be his vanguard. It even forced Lin Feng to go to the void so that no one could deduce him. Now Lin Feng had some strength, but Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star was still a huge threat. Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star? There's no need to worry, Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star can barely protect himself now. Huh? Can barely protect himself? What does that mean? Lin Feng was slightly stunned as he asked. The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign doesn't know? Though that's normal. Some time ago, the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign was still in the void, so you don't know the situation in the medium Kiliakosm. Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star's cataclysmic power has already spread. His 8th epical cataclysm will arrive soon, but the small Kiliakosm origin he accumulated is insufficient. Hence, Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star began to go berserk. He began to find those 5 Cataclysm, 6 Cataclysm, and even 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, and plundered their small Kiliakosm origin in a frenzy, heedless of the cost. Facing such a crazy Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star, those 5 Cataclysm and 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns could only endure it or avoid him early on. However, those 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns also lacked small Kiliakosm origin. How could they tolerate Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star? Hence, Kiliakosm's Sovereign 100 Flowers, who was also a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, fought with Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star. Now that they've gone deep into the void to fight, no one knows what's going on. However, nothing had happened to their pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns. They probably didn't suffer any serious injuries. Lin Feng nodded. All along, he had seen Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star as a threat and a great enemy. Unexpectedly, Lin Feng was nothing in the eyes of Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star. He did not even pay attention to Lin Feng. What could the principle of spacetime do to help Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star? What Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star needed the most was the small Kiliakosm origin. For a moment, Lin Feng did not know if he should feel melancholy or anything else. His emotions were very complicated. He had a feeling that all his previous efforts seemed to have been in vain. Seeing Lin Feng's strange expression, Kiliakosm's Sovereign Skyheart knew all the things about Lin Feng. So, he had a rough idea of what Lin Feng was thinking. Hence, Kiliakosm's Sovereign Skyheart shook his head and said, "There's no need to be disappointed about it. Chaos Kiliakosm's Sovereign. A top entity like Kiliakosm's Sovereign Nonary Star no longer has his sights on Kiliakosm sovereigns like us. They only have one goal, and that is the medium Kiliakosm Sovereign. The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign isn't in danger for the time being. In the past, the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign had descended with your soul, right? Actually, there's no need to do this. It's too dangerous to descend with the soul. Moreover, as the amount of small Kiliakosm origin we need increases, the small Kiliakosms you descend to will also have to be larger and larger. However, while there are infinite small Kiliakosms, how many truly massive small Kiliakosms are there? Actually, even descending with the soul cannot bring us a lot of small Kiliakosm origin anymore. We still have to use the traditional method and try our best to send the supremacies under our command into the small Kiliakosms. However, in the past, we were all Kiliakosm sovereigns below the Four Cataclysm, and could only compete with other factions. Now, we have all become Four Cataclysm hegemons. Naturally, we can't use the same method as before. Most hegemonial experts do not need to compete with other factions for small Kiliakosms. Instead, they want to monopolize small Kiliakosms. Every hegemonial expert actually has a large number of small Kiliakosms under their command, and all of them are small Kiliakosms that they monopolize. Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. Do you still not understand? As Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart explained, Lin Feng's eyes gradually lit up. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart, you mean that we should fight for the small Kiliakosms now and monopolize them one after another, so that we can constantly harvest small Kiliakosm origin to accumulate the small Kiliakosm origin? That's right, exactly. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He thought of Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm Sovereign Iris Light, whom he had killed today, and even Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, whom he had killed previously. These were all fallen hegemons. How many small Kiliakosms must they have monopolized? Do you understand now? Understood. Thank you, Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart shook his head and said, there's no need. This is just general knowledge. The reason I didn't tell you this previously is that there's some trouble. I'm afraid you'll act rashly. Huh? What do you mean? Lin Feng had a vague premonition. You killed Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, but the outside world doesn't know. With the death of Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, how can the other hegemonial Kiliakosm sovereigns sit still? Hence, the small Kiliakosms of Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold has long been divided up. I'm afraid that you'll be too rash. If you get into a dispute with the other hegemonial Kiliakosm sovereigns, it'll be troublesome. However, now that I think about it, my worries are unfounded. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart smiled weakly and shook his head. He had not told Lin Feng about these things back then out of goodwill, not wanting Lin Feng to clash with the other hegemons. But from the looks of it, he had far underestimated Lin Feng's strength. With such terrifying strength, why would Lin Feng care about other hegemonial experts? It's not too late now. I'll make those who devoured my small Kiliakosms spit them out one by one. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. By the way, Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, you have to hurry up and receive the small Kiliakosms of Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm Sovereign Iris Light. Otherwise, some accident might happen. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart hurriedly said, some accident will happen if one delay? There's no hurry. The later, the better. If an accident really happens, it'll be a good thing. Then, I'll be justified in attacking the other hegemons. Lin Feng's words stunned Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart. However, he quickly reacted. Indeed, Lin Feng should not be judged by common sense. Even though Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart was also a Four Cataclysm hegemon, he absolutely could not treat other hegemons and Kiliakosm sovereigns like nothing. Perhaps this was the difference between him and the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. Moreover, starting from the Four Cataclysm, Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart already had a vague prediction that the gap between him and Lin Feng would probably increase rapidly. With Lin Feng's strength, if he expanded on a large scale, he would obtain more and more small Kiliakosm origin. At that time, he would also harvest more and more small Kiliakosm origin. This was a positive cycle. Lin Feng would also become stronger and stronger. In the end, he would reach a level that even Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart had to look up to. However, while he could work with Lin Feng once, he could not work with him twice, thrice, or even stay by Lin Feng's side forever. Cultivation ultimately still depended on oneself. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart left, while Lin Feng bided his time. However, he got Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic to send people to keep an eye on the dojos of Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm Sovereign Iris Light, and waited quietly. At the same time, he began to inquire about the Imperial Gold Dojo. Time passed day by day. As the news of Lin Feng killing 2 Four Cataclysm hegemons spread, Lin Feng's power also became stronger and stronger day by day. He was also at the height of his power among hegemons. No one dared to provoke Lin Feng and the Chaos Dojo anymore. However, after an entire year, Lin Feng was very disappointed. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. Is there really no one who has touched the Scarlet Dojo and the Irised Light Dojo? Lin Feng still seemed to be in disbelief. Your Majesty, the Kiliakosm Sovereign, it's absolutely true. Indeed, no one has touched the Scarlet Dojo and the Irised Light Dojo. As for the small Kiliakosms under the two dojos, this is an absolute secret. Outsiders don't know at all. Only the people in the dojo know. Lin Feng nodded. This was very normal. Which Kiliakosm Sovereign would publicize the small Kiliakosms they monopolized? They would all make a fortune in secret and secretly harvest the small Kiliakosm origin. Only a few people at the core in the dojo knew the details of the small Kiliakosms. Lin Feng did not know if he should be happy or disappointed. He had deliberately waited for a full year just to see which Kiliakosm Sovereign would not be able to resist occupying the Iris Light Dojo and the Scarlet Dojo. In the end, no one touched these two dojos. Even if the 4 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign did not dare to, 5 Cataclysm or 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereigns could not be afraid of Lin Feng, right? Actually, Lin Feng had been assumptuous. 5 Cataclysm and 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereigns were indeed not afraid of Lin Feng, but they could not do anything to Lin Feng either. The key was that everyone knew Lin Feng's current momentum. It would not be a problem for him to become a 5 Cataclysm or 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign at all. If they offended Lin Feng now, and could not kill Lin Feng and completely eliminate the threat, clashing with Lin Feng would undoubtedly be the most unwise thing. Lin Feng could kill 2 4 Cataclysm hegemons by relying on the river of spacetime now. If they became mortal enemies with Lin Feng for the sake of some small Kiliakosms, in the future, when Lin Feng's strength improved greatly, would he be able to kill 2 5 Cataclysm or even 6 Cataclysm hegemons in the future? No one who could become a Kiliakosm Sovereign was stupid. In particular, those who had become hegemons were incomparably clear-headed. Hence, no one touched the Scarlet Dojo and the Irised Light Dojo for a year. After all, these 2 hegemonial Kiliakosm Sovereigns had both been killed by Lin Feng. Naturally, the other Kiliakosm Sovereigns saw them as Lin Feng's rightful possessions. This was unless Lin Feng waited a little longer. However, if he waited any longer, the supremacies of the 2 dojos might have to find other avenues. At that time, he would not even be able to find the small Kiliakosms. Forget it. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. Bring people to take over the Scarlet Dojo and the Irised Light Dojo. I'll be leaving first. With that, the power of spacetime on his body flashed, and he disappeared without a trace. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic was elated. He muttered in a low voice, His Majesty the Kiliakosm Sovereign's principle of spacetime is becoming more and more profound. Even with Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic's insight, he could tell that Lin Feng's principle of spacetime was becoming more and more profound. It was enough to show how profound Lin Feng's comprehension of the principle of spacetime was. In reality, this was still thanks to his spacetime physique. Ever since Lin Feng became a 4 Cataclysm hegemon, and his physique became the spacetime physique, it became easier and easier for him to use the power of spacetime. In the past, when he wanted to warp through spacetime, he could only rely on the river of spacetime and use it to warp. But now, Lin Feng could easily mobilize the power of spacetime and completely enter spacetime to warp it. Lin Feng still had to increase his understanding of the power of spacetime and the principle of spacetime. This bit of comprehension was far from what could be considered comprehension of the principle of spacetime. He knew that the principle of spacetime was profound. At least for now, Lin Feng could not slay his past self or his future self. He could not even annihilate past enemies. Lin Feng had a vague feeling that this was the essence or true meaning of the principle of spacetime. Comprehending it to this realm was probably far from something he could succeed with his current strength. It had been an entire year for the Scarlet Dojo. Although the Scarlet Dojo had not reached the extent of rats leaving a sinking ship, it was still on the verge of collapse. Originally, the Scarlet Dojo was the dojo of a hegemonial Kiliakosm Sovereign. There were many supremacies, and its foundation was profound. Every hegemonial Kiliakosm Sovereign had a very deep foundation. In fact, the Scarlet Dojo alone monopolized 1,099 small Kiliakosms. This also meant that there were thousands of supremacies who had descended into the small kiliocosms. Just the number of 3-star supremacies alone was 2 to 3,000. Such a base number was actually rather terrifying. Originally, there were 2 pseudo-kiliocosm sovereigns in the Scarlet Dojo, enough to manage the matters of the dojo. However, as Kiliocosm Sovereign Scarlet was killed, the 2 pseudo-kiliocosm sovereigns naturally fell as well. The Scarlet Dojo wound up without a leader. They originally thought that someone would soon come to occupy the Scarlet Dojo. At that time, supremacies like them would still be supremacies. At most, they would just get another Kiliocosm sovereign. However, who would have thought that after a year, no faction had come to take over the Scarlet Dojo? This was greatly beyond the expectations of the many Kiliocosm sovereigns of the Scarlet Dojo. Hence, many Kiliocosm sovereigns became a little anxious. What should we do now? There are still many supremacies in the small Kiliocosms who have yet to return. Without a Kiliocosm sovereign, it's impossible to open the Ascension passage. Wouldn't those people all die in the small Kiliocosms? My senior brother is still in the small Kiliocosm. This won't do. I have to think of a way. How can no faction be willing to take over the esteemed Scarlet Dojo, the dojo of a hegemonial Kiliocosm sovereign? Can we only keep waiting like this? When would we wait until? El heard that His Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign was killed by the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign. Why don't we go to the Chaos Dojo? The Scarlet Dojo was in chaos. Many supremacies began to think of another way out, and even coveted the treasures of the Scarlet Dojo. However, they were all supremacies and did not have the guts to act. However, as time passed, if the Scarlet Dojo continued to be in chaos, that might not be the case. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying pressure instantly enveloped the entire Scarlet Dojo, suffocating all the supremacies. Right on the heels of that, a magnificent and loud voice echoed in the dojo. I am the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign. From today onwards, the Scarlet Dojo belongs to me. It will become the second Chaos Dojo. The mighty voice echoed in the Scarlet Dojo. For a moment, all the supremacies actually did not have any sorrowful expressions. Instead, all of them revealed joyous expressions, appearing rather happy. Lin Feng descended to the Scarlet Dojo. With a sweep of his mental power, he investigated the situation in the Scarlet Dojo clearly. It was obvious at a glance that there was no Kiliocosm sovereign in the current Scarlet Dojo, but the many 3-star supremacies still allowed Lin Feng to see its foundation. As expected of a hegemon-level dojo, it was far stronger than the Chaos Dojo. Of course, no matter how deep their foundation was, it was useless. Any dojo relied on a powerful Kiliocosm sovereign. Without a powerful Kiliocosm sovereign, the dojo would collapse at once. If not for Lin Feng's deterrence, the Scarlet Dojo would probably have long been divided among the other Kiliocosm sovereign factions. Lin Feng entered the hall of the Scarlet Dojo directly. All the supremacies trembled under this terrifying pressure and lowered their heads in submission. There might also be loyalists in the dojo, but there were simply too few of them. The supremacies were all very realistic. What difference would it make to follow another Kiliocosm sovereign? Changing a Kiliocosm sovereign actually had no impact on them at all. It was all the same. All they cared about was that small amount of benefits. Lin Feng naturally had use for these supremacies. These supremacies were still needed to manage the small Kiliocosms of the Scarlet Dojo. Lin Feng naturally had no intention of eliminating them, because it was meaningless. Greetings, Your Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign. Lin Feng sat high on the throne. All the supremacies knelt on the ground. They felt that the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign in front of them was even stronger than Kiliocosm Sovereign Scarlet. This was naturally a good thing. The stronger the Kiliocosm Sovereign, the more small Kiliocosms he could occupy. Then, they would naturally be able to obtain more benefits. Why would they not be happy to accept it? Lin Feng glanced at the many supremacies below and said in a low voice, "Who's the supremacy in charge?" The many supremacies looked at each other. Actually, there was no such thing as a supremacy in charge. They were all 3-star supremacies, and had all listened to the orders of the two pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns previously. Now that the Kiliakosm sovereign was no longer around, supremacies like them were pushed to the front of the stage instead. In the end, a burly 3-star supremacy braced himself and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I've been following Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet for a long time. If your Majesty has any questions, I'll be certain to tell you the truth." Lin Feng nodded and said, "Let me ask Vu, how manned small Kiliakosms are there under the Scarlet Dojo at the moment?" The Scarlet Dojo currently occupies 1,099 small Kiliakosms. Among them, more than 900 small Kiliakosms have already been completely occupied. Dozens of smaller Kiliakosms are still in the process of being occupied. They should all be completely occupied after some time. Lin Feng nodded and continued to ask, "Is there any small Kiliakosm origin in the Scarlet Dojo?" "Yes, but most of them are stored in His Majesty the Kiliakosm Sovereign's small Kiliakosm. Only a small portion has yet to be handed over to His Majesty the Kiliakosm Sovereign. They are currently stored in the treasure vault." Lin Feng was a little disappointed, but this was normal. How precious was small Kiliakosm origin? How could Kiliakosm sovereigns leave it anywhere else at will? Only one's own small Kiliakosm was the safest. Unfortunately, Lin Feng swept Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm Sovereign Iris Light into the river of spacetime. When they reached the end of time, Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm Sovereign Iris Light were both reduced to ashes. The small Kiliakosm origin in their internal small Kiliakosms was naturally reduced to ashes. No power could withstand the corrosion of time. Lin Feng also could not obtain the small Kiliakosm origin in the bodies of the two hegemonial Kiliakosm sovereigns alone. Although it was a pity, this was already within Lin Feng's expectations. Hence, he nodded and continued, "Send a message to the supremacies of the 1,099 small Kiliakosms immediately, informing them that the Scarlet Dojo no longer exists. However, the Chaos Dojo is still around. They will still harvest the small Kiliakosm origin the same way as before. The rules will not change at all." In fact, Lin Feng paused for a moment and saw the longing gazes of many supremacies below. He naturally knew what these people were looking forward to. Up until now, Lin Feng's Chaos Dojo only had one pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign, while ordinary hegemon-level dojos had 2 or even 3 pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns. This meant that there was a vacancy and everyone had a chance. In fact, if anyone performs the best, I am willing to bestow them a Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone. As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, all the supremacies were overjoyed. A Kiliakosm sovereign. Even a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign was the highest goal that countless supremacies dreamed of attaining. Wasn't the highest achievement of these supremacies who used the boundary stone to become a Kiliakosm sovereign? Now that Lin Feng had given them this opportunity, even if it was only a little hope, this little hope was enough to make all the supremacies work in a frenzy. These were just minor methods to rope people in. They were not worth mentioning. Lin Feng did not intend to go back on his word. In fact, he had already begun to make preparations. If he had enough small Kiliakosm origin, he would nurture 2 more Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stones and create 2 pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns, who would guard the Scarlet Dojo and the Iris Light Dojo respectively. This way, each of the 3 Chaos Dojos would have a Kiliakosm sovereign presiding over it. They were enough to handle most matters. "Take me to the treasure vault." Lin Feng asked the supremacy of the Scarlet Dojo to bring him to the treasure vault of the dojo. The treasure vault was still intact and undamaged. These supremacies also knew very well that although Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet was dead, there would definitely be a Kiliakosm Sovereign coming to take over the Scarlet Dojo. Who would dare to destroy the treasure vault? Not only would they not dare to destroy it, they would even guard it diligently. Once the treasure vault was damaged, all the supremacies in the dojo would probably be unable to bear the consequences of failure. Lin Feng entered the treasure vault and realized that there was a dazzling array of treasures inside. There were all kinds of supreme treasures, secret treasures, and even some miraculous items in the small Kiliakosm. There was simply everything. If used by 3-star supremacies, Some of these supreme treasures could even make them invincible among 3-star supremacies. L didn't expect Kiliakazam's sovereign Scarlet to plunder so many supreme treasures. Unfortunately, he was a little stingy and didn't reward many to the supremacies of the Scarlet Dojo. Lin Feng shook his head. No matter how precious a supreme treasure was, if no one used it, it would be useless. It was simply a waste. Of course, he would not leave these supreme treasures lying in a forgotten corner, so he stored them all in the small Kiliakazam. Finally, Lin Feng also saw the small Kiliakazam origin in the treasure vault. It was indeed a small fraction, only about 30 portions. 30 portions of small Kiliakazam origin, and complete portions at that. If they were given to those 1 cataclysm or 2 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns, there was no knowing how excited they would be. However, in the eyes of a 4 cataclysm hegemon, dozens of portions of small Kiliakazam origin were indeed not worth mentioning. Lin Feng did not mind. He swept all this small Kiliakazam origin into his internal small Kiliakazam and returned to the hall. Soon, the people from the Chaos Dojo arrived as well. Lin Feng asked the people from the Chaos Dojo to take over the Scarlet Dojo, while he asked the Kiliakazam Sovereign Epic to formulate a detailed contribution system. They even included the Iris Light Dojo in the contribution system as well. As long as one's contribution reached a certain level, they could redeem secret techniques and supreme treasures. These were all publicly redeemed. It was simple and clear. This way, with just a small trick, all the supremacies of the Iris Light Dojo and the Scarlet Dojo immediately became loyal. They completely forgot their previous identities and became members of the Chaos Dojo. The 3 Chaos Dojos complemented each other. They could be considered unique in the entire medium Kiliakazam. For a moment, Lin Feng's reorganization attracted the attention of the other dojo factions. Some dojo factions even sent some congratulatory gifts to Lin Feng. Lin Feng accepted them one by one. This meant that Lin Feng and the Chaos Dojo had completely integrated into the system of hegemonial factions. There are about over 40 portions of small Kiliakazam origins. The Scarlet Dojo and the Iris Light Dojo control about 2,500 small Kiliakazams in total. Kiliakazam Sovereign Epic had already tabulated all the data on the current 3 Chaos Dojos. The Scarlet Dojo and the Iris Light Dojo had a deep foundation, far surpassing the Chaos Dojo. Of course, there were already 3 Chaos Dojos now, and the original Chaos Dojo was considered the headquarters. More than 2,000 small Kiliakazams were actually quite good. Only those very ancient or 4 cataclysm hegemons with deep foundations could surpass Lin Feng, who had 3 Chaos Dojos at this moment. Even so, it was almost impossible for a 4 cataclysm hegemon to possess more than 3,000 small Kiliakazams. With 2,500 small Kiliakazams, even if only 5 small Kiliakazams could give Lin Feng 1 complete portion of small Kiliakazam origin in an epic, he would still be able to obtain more than 500 portions of small Kiliakazam origin. Of course, that was within an epic. After all, the small Kiliakazam origin in a small Kiliakazam could only be obtained when the epical cataclysm erupted. More than 500 portions of small Kiliakazam origin. How daunting was this? Normally, it would be quite impressive if someone below 4 cataclysm had dozens or hundreds of portions of small Kiliakazam origin. However, 4 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereigns were somewhat special. The 4th epical cataclysm was much more frightening than the first 3 epical cataclysms, and at least hundreds of portions of small Kiliakazam origin were required. Lin Feng had also obtained a large amount of small Kiliakazam origin in the Null Magus Forbidden Zone. Only then could he survive the 4th epical cataclysm at one go, and become a 4 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. Of course, the situations of the Kiliakazam sovereigns were different, and the small Kiliakazams they evolved were also different. Hence, the amount of small Kiliakazam origin required was naturally different. However, the 4th epical cataclysm should require at least 300 portions of small Kiliakazam origin overall. Lin Feng had spent at least 500 portions of small Kiliakazam origin to become a 4 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. It was just that his river of spacetime was also undergoing metamorphosis, and he had even acquired the spacetime physique which had consumed a large amount of small Kiliakazam origin. For instance, Lin Feng had only given Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart about 300 portions of small Kiliakosm origin. In addition to what Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart had accumulated himself, it had exceeded 500 portions of small Kiliakosm origin no matter what. It was more than enough to survive the fourth epical cataclysm. As for the fifth epical cataclysm, ordinary Kiliakosm sovereigns only needed about 600 portions of small Kiliakosm origin. Lin Feng estimated that he would probably need at least 1,000 portions of small Kiliakosm origin himself. This was the consumption brought about by the spacetime physique. In order to replenish the spacetime physique, especially under the epical cataclysm, the consumption of small Kiliakosm origin was also very terrifying. Hence, Lin Feng calculated carefully. With 2,500 small Kiliakosms, he could only accumulate at most 500 complete portions of small Kiliakosm origin in an epoch. It was still 100 portions of small Kiliakosm short for ordinary 4 cataclysm hegemons, let alone Lin Feng. Perhaps only those hegemons with very deep foundations could safely survive the 5th epical cataclysm and become the 5 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Apart from that, most of the 4 cataclysm hegemons actually could not survive it and would all be annihilated. This was also why Kiliakosm Sovereign Scarlet and Kiliakosm Sovereign Iris Light still could not gather enough small Kiliakosm origin, even though they were about to face the 5th epical cataclysm soon. The small Kiliakosm origin was not so easy to obtain. However, with 500 portions of small Kiliakosm origin and some foundation, one could manage to gather 600 portions of small Kiliakosm origin. For ordinary Kiliakosm sovereigns, it was enough for them to actually try to survive the 5th epical cataclysm. Moreover, the probability of success was very high. But Lin Feng was different. He had a spacetime physique, which allowed him to use the principle of spacetime with even less consumption. Now, he was almost invincible among those at the same level. However, the price for this was that it would be even more difficult to restore the small Kiliakosm WHE surviving the epical cataclysm. It would require more small Kiliakosm origin, which was very disadvantageous for surviving the epical cataclysm. If he wanted to survive the 5th epical cataclysm safely, he would need at least 1,000 portions of small Kiliakosm origin. Hence, if Lin Feng felt that he could relax just by relying on these 2,500 small Kiliakosms, he would probably be in deep trouble when the 5th epical cataclysm arrived. Not enough. These 2,500 small Kiliakosms are far from enough. Lin Feng frowned. Not only was the small Kiliakosm origin obtained from 2,500 small Kiliakosm insufficient, Lin Feng could not wait as long as an epoch. After so long, it's time to retrieve the small Kiliakosms that belong to me. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. He was naturally referring to the small Kiliakosm of Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold. After Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold was dead, the Imperial Gold Dojo had also fallen apart. During this period of time, Lin Feng had been asking Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic to investigate matters regarding the Imperial Gold Dojo. Now, he had roughly investigated some things. Hence, Lin Feng summoned the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic to inquire about the details of the Imperial Gold Dojo. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, how's your investigation of the Imperial Gold Dojo going? Soon, the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic arrived in front of Lin Feng, and Lin Feng asked him directly. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic nodded and said, "The situation at the Imperial Gold Dojo is very complicated, but I've more or less managed to investigate it. Ever since the death of Kiliakosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, the Imperial Gold Dojo has actually been divided. More than 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns have divided the Imperial Gold Dojo. There's also a 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign who sent a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign to take over the Imperial Gold Dojo. As for the small Kiliakosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo, they should have also been divided between the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns and that 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Oh, it also involves a 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? That's right. Currently, the one occupying the Imperial Gold Dojo is the 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign's dojo faction, the Nebula Dojo. Lin Feng nodded. He had naturally heard of the Nebula Dojo. Behind it was Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula. This was a very ancient Kiliakosm sovereign. He had cultivated all the way to become a 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, and basically everything had gone smoothly for him along the way. His foundation was profound, and he was actually rather mysterious. No one knew how strong Kiliakosm's sovereign nebula was. However, Kiliakosm's sovereign nebula was not domineering. He had never killed other Kiliakosm sovereigns. Instead, he was relatively amiable and had a wide network. For example, this time, with the power of Kiliakosm's sovereign nebula, even if he completely monopolized all the small Kiliakosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo, the other 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns would not be able to do anything. However, the Nebula Dojo did not monopolize them. It only took the lion's share. This was a 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign who's very troublesome to deal with. However, Lin Feng did not intend to look for Kiliakosm sovereign nebula directly, nor did he intend to face the Nebula Dojo directly. The reason he investigated for so long and endured for so long was to cast a long line to catch the big fish, and completely understand the situation at the Imperial Gold Dojo. With 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns participating in the operation to divide the Imperial Gold Dojo, that was enough. Give me all the details of the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Kiliakosm's sovereign epic was already prepared. He finished organizing the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, and even their dojo factions, and handed them all to Lin Feng. Clearly, Kiliakosm's sovereign epic had also roughly guessed Lin Feng's plan. However, even Kiliakosm's sovereign epic was very shocked by Lin Feng's plan and ambition. Lin Feng checked the information of the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns carefully. All of them were dojos with deep foundations. Moreover, their relationships with the other Kiliakosm sovereigns were complicated, and they had a wide network. However, this was not what Lin Feng valued. No matter how wide one's network was, it was not as important as strength. No matter how wide one's network was, would they stand up for someone in a life-or-death crisis? There were probably very few people who would stand up for Lin Feng. Kiliakosm's sovereign Skyheart could be considered to have a good relationship with Lin Feng. However, if Lin Feng was hunted down by a 7-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, would Kiliakosm's sovereign Skyheart still dare to stand up forcibly and stand with Lin Feng? Hence, nothing was more important than one's own strength. Lin Feng was also paying attention to the strength of these 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns. Let's release some news first. I was the one who killed Kiliakosm's sovereign Imperial Gold. If those 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns have sense, they naturally know what to do. If they really hand over all those small Kiliakosms to the Chaos Dojo, I won't go looking for them one by one. If they're unmoved, I might have to find them personally. At that time, there'll be reason and evidence. Even if one kill them, I believe no one will say anything. Lin Feng was still prepared to show courtesy before resorting to force. The reason was very simple. Lin Feng was also afraid of causing a series of chain reactions. For example, what if these 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns joined forces? Lin Feng was not afraid of 1, 2, or even 3 Kiliakosm sovereigns, but what if 8 or 9 joined forces? Those were 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns, not cabbages. Even though Lin Feng already had the spacetime physique, and could mobilize the river of spacetime with ease, killing 9 4-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns in one fell swoop would still incur a huge burden. In fact, it might even crush Lin Feng's small Kiliakosm in the end. In particular, this involved a 5-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Lin Feng had no choice but to be on guard. Showing courtesy before resorting to force was the best choice. Lin Feng did not want to threaten everyone and end up being targeted by all the Kiliakosm sovereigns. After all, if Lin Feng went around brazenly killing Kiliakosm sovereigns and monopolizing small Kiliakosms without restraint, how could the other Kiliakosm sovereigns not do anything? There had to be a very good reason and excuse. The matter with the Imperial Gold Dojo was undoubtedly the best reason. Kiliakosm's sovereign epic nodded and immediately went down. He began to spread the news that Lin Feng had killed Kiliakosm's sovereign Imperial Gold. As long as the news spread, those Kiliakosm sovereigns who had divided the Imperial Gold Dojo would definitely understand the meaning behind it. As for what choice they made, it would depend on the decision of those Kiliakosm sovereigns. Undercurrents had been surging in the medium kiliocosm recently, and it was very lively. In the past, the medium kiliocosm was very calm, but during this period of time, one turmoil came after another. First, the two seventh calamity kiliocosm sovereigns fought a huge battle. They were very insane. Fortunately, they had already gone to the void and away from the medium kiliocosm, so they could not affect it. But very soon, the chaos kiliocosm sovereign Lin Feng was revealed to be already a four-cataclysm hegemon. Moreover, he had killed kiliocosm sovereign Iris Light and kiliocosm sovereign Scarlet in succession. These two four-cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns had joined forces, but they were still killed by Lin Feng with ease. He had even taken over their dojos. The chaos kiliocosm sovereign, Lin Feng, had become a top four-cataclysm hegemon in one leap. Even the Chaos Dojo had become a major faction among the four cataclysm hegemons. Lin Feng's attack also allowed many kiliocosm sovereigns to truly see the power of the principle of spacetime again. However, there was no longer any point in coveting Lin Feng's principle of spacetime now. Even the five cataclysm and six cataclysm kiliocosm sovereigns might not be confident in completely defeating Lin Feng, let alone others. The current Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign had already completely ascended to power. He already had the strength to possess the principle of spacetime, and was not afraid of all others coveting it. However, this was not the end. Now, another piece of news was gradually circulating in the medium Kiliocosm. It turned out that Kiliocosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, who had fallen back then, had been killed by the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign in the Null Magus Forbidden Zone. Before this, there were only some guesses, but guesses could not be taken seriously after all. The news that circulated this time was originally circulated from the Chaos Dojo. Many Kiliocosm sovereigns still did not understand what this meant, but some four cataclysm hegemons vaguely understood the Chaos Dojo's intention. For a moment, there was a faint undercurrent surging behind the turmoils. In the Monarch Dojo, after the pseudo-Kiliocosm sovereign of the dojo reported the news circulated by the Chaos Dojo to Kiliocosm sovereign monarch, he opened his eyes and sneered, "What a good plan. Are they trying to make us spit out the small Kiliocosms we've devoured? Dream on. But your majesty, if we don't retreat, the Chaos Kiliocosm sovereign will have an excuse to attack us," the pseudo-Kiliocosm sovereign said worriedly. "Finding an excuse is all too easy. Moreover, others are afraid of the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign, but I'm not. I'm not the only Kiliocosm Sovereign who has divided the small Kiliocosm of the Imperial Gold Dojo. Kiliocosm Sovereign Nebula is also involved. I'll contact Kiliocosm Sovereign Nebula immediately. If the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign really dares to use this as an excuse, I won't hold back either." Although Kiliocosm Sovereign Monarch said that he was not afraid of Lin Feng, in reality, he was also very wary. However, as a dignified hegemonial Kiliocosm sovereign, he could not bring himself to spit out the benefits he had already taken. However, the recent behavior of the Chaos Kiliocosm sovereign was really a little crazy, even savage. Even Kiliocosm sovereign monarch felt deep wariness. After learning this news, he immediately informed Kiliocosm sovereign Nebula and the other 8 four-cataclysm Kiliocosm sovereigns. Even if someone had to be responsible for such an important matter, he would not be the only one. Intense debates were also occurring in the hall of the Gentai Dojo. "Your Majesty, the Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign is not an ordinary Kiliocosm Sovereign, but a Kiliocosm Sovereign who controls the power of spacetime. The message released by the Chaos Dojo this time can't be clearer. The Chaos Dojo wants to show courtesy before resorting to force. We divided some of the small Kiliocosms in the Imperial Gold Dojo. It's nothing much. There's no need to take such a huge risk. However, if we really spit out the small Kiliocosm we obtained, we will lose all our dignity. This will be a huge blow to our dojo. Is dignity more important than survival? The Chaos Kiliocosm Sovereign is a terrifying entity that can kill a four-cataclysm hegemon." For a moment, everyone debated endlessly. In the end, it was Kiliocosm Sovereign Gentai who made the decision. "Just now, Kiliocosm Sovereign Monarch has already sent a message to me. I'll contact Kiliocosm Sovereign Nebula later. We still have to discuss how to deal with this matter." If Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula is willing to act on our behalf, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign is nothing. Kiliacosm Sovereign Gentai made the decision to wait and see. Apart from the Kiliacosm Sovereign Monarch and Kiliacosm Sovereign Gentai, who had both made the decision to wait and see, the other Kiliacosm Sovereigns also made the same decision one after another. If they spat out the small Kiliacosm out of fear from a little news, when the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign had not even addressed them publicly, these hegemonial Kiliacosm Sovereigns really could not afford to lose face like this. Moreover, this matter involved Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. They still had to consider his attitude too. In the Nebula Dojo, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula's originally closed eyes suddenly opened again. Your Majesty, the Kiliacosm Sovereign. A pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign came respectfully in front of Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. What is it? Your Majesty, there has been news from the Chaos Dojo recently that Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold was killed by the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. The meaning behind this is probably, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula thought for a moment and understood. At the same time, he seemed to have received many messages at once. They were all messages from the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns back then. Hence, a smile gradually appeared on Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula's lips. Looks like the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns are already anxious. They have already sent messages to me, asking me to make a decision. The pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign was a little unhappy. He sneered, "Hey, they wish. Back when they took the benefits, none of them stood on ceremony. Now that they're in trouble, they want Your Majesty the Kiliacosm Sovereign to step in? How can there be such a good thing?" However, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula pondered for a moment and shook his head. That's not necessarily the case. Back then, the small Kiliacosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo were divided between us. Since something has arisen, we naturally have to shoulder it together. Actually, this matter is not a big deal. Although Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold was killed by the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, does it mean that the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign should obtain the small Kiliacosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo? This only means that the Imperial Gold Dojo was unclaimed back then. It's naturally not a problem for us to divide it. The only problem might be the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. Actually, everyone had seen this matter very clearly. Dividing the Imperial Gold Dojo was not a big problem. How could a hegemon's dojo be preserved properly after he had fallen? That was impossible. It would definitely be divided. The problem now was that someone was competing for the small Kiliacosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo that had been divided back then. This was the crux of the problem, especially since the person competing was very powerful. This was even more troublesome. Your Majesty, the strength of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign is one thing. Even ordinary 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns are not his match. If Your Majesty attacks, we would naturally have nothing to fear. However, the key is the potential of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. He possesses the principle of spacetime and is so powerful. His potential is unimaginable. The pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign's expression was a little solemn. Recently, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign could be said to be at the height of his reputation in the medium Kiliacosm. This was not without reason. Why did those 5 cataclysm and even 6 cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns not cause trouble for Lin Feng? Could it really be because it had nothing to do with them? It was probably not that simple. The most fundamental reason was still Lin Feng's potential. In less than 10,000 years, he had already gone from an ordinary Kiliacosm Sovereign to a 4-cataclysm hegemon. If Lin Feng was given more time, how terrifying would his achievements be? 5 cataclysm? 6 cataclysm? Or even 7 cataclysm or 8 cataclysm? No one knew how far Lin Feng could reach in the end, but just this terrifying potential was enough to make any Kiliacosm Sovereign extremely wary. Actually, we're not completely out of solutions. Huh? Kiliacosm Sovereign? Do you have a solution? Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula said with a smile. All of you are wary of the potential of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, but you haven't realized that the difficulty of obtaining small Kiliacosm origin for him has increased exponentially in such a short period of time. In order to become a 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign, He has already gone to venture into the null magus forbidden zone. Then, what about the 5 cataclysm and 6 cataclysm? Even if he ventures into all 10 forbidden zones in the medium kiliacosm, will he really be able to obtain enough small kiliacosm origin? I'm afraid not. Moreover, there are some forbidden zones that even a 7 cataclysm kiliacosm sovereign wouldn't dare to venture too deep into. No matter how strong the chaos kiliacosm sovereign is, he still needs small kiliacosm origin to survive the epical cataclysm. Otherwise, his strength will stagnate, and he won't even be able to survive the epical cataclysm. The most direct channel to obtain small kiliacosm origin is the small kiliacosms. If the chaos kiliacosm sovereign is really unscrupulous, we'll suppress him with all our might. He has the principle of spacetime. One can't kill him, but he can also forget about doing anything to me. At that time, how much small kiliacosm origin can he obtain from the small kiliacosms I suppress with all my might, or even conquered? The amount of small kiliacosm origin required to go from the 4 cataclysm to the 5 cataclysm is not a small number. Without a large number of small kiliacosms, it's simply a fool's dream to survive the 5th epical cataclysm. Even if he can descend with his soul, even if he descends for an entire epoch, how can there be so many massive small kiliacosms for him to descend to? If his soul is severely injured once, all his previous efforts will be in vain. As Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula analyzed, the eyes of the pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign also lit up. Indeed, this was the weakness of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, and it was a fatal weakness. Most of the Kiliacosm Sovereigns in the medium Kiliacosm had probably been shocked by the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign's recent domineering performance. This was the case even for those 5 Cataclysm and 6 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns. They were all intimidated by Lin Feng. They only knew that the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, Lin Feng, was powerful, had mastered the principle of spacetime, and even had infinite potential. However, they did not know Lin Feng's fatal weakness. Or rather, this was also the weakness of all the Kiliacosm Sovereigns, the small Kiliacosm origin. Your Majesty, after what you said, it seems like the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign is nothing to worry about, the pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign said in a relaxed tone. No, it's the opposite. My analysis just now is a method we would only use as a last resort. This is because once we use this method, we'll be fighting the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign to the death. If a Kiliacosm Sovereign with infinite potential really makes an enemy of us, it'll be very troublesome, especially if we can't kill him. That'll be even more troublesome. Hence, we decidedly can't use this method unless absolutely necessary. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula was very clear-headed. It was not wise to exhaust a 4 Cataclysm hegemonial expert to death over a long period of time. Even if they could win, it would definitely be a Pyrrhic victory, or both parties would suffer heavy losses. Your Majesty, since we can't use this method unless absolutely necessary, what should we do about this matter? The method is very simple. Get the 9 4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns to gather together. Every Kiliacosm Sovereign will take the initiative to spit out a small Kiliacosm. In addition, I will also give a small Kiliacosm. This will make a total of 10 small Kiliacosm we give to the Chaos Dojo. This way, it will give both of us face. The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign will also receive denence. Everyone NAS a way out. This was the method that Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula had thought of. Actually, this method also had a certain impact on him, a dignified 5 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign. After all, taking the initiative to give up a small Kiliacosm, even if it was just one, was actually a blow to his reputation. However, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula could endure it. This was also the most important reason why he could have everything go smoothly and cultivate until now. Unless absolutely necessary, he would not clash with any Kiliacosm Sovereign. This was especially the case for the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign with infinite potential. I'll inform the other 9 4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns. You'll make a trip to the Chaos Dojo personally and settle this matter. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula instructed. As Your Majesty, the Kiliacosm Sovereign commands. The pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign also retreated respectfully, and began to rush to the Chaos Dojo according to Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula's instructions. A few days passed in a row in the Chaos Dojo. The news from the Chaos Dojo had also spread. Lin Feng estimated that those Kiliacosm sovereigns should have received the news by now. Hence, he summoned Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic to inquire. Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic. Have those Kiliacosm sovereigns in the medium Kiliacosm made any moves recently? Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic shook his head and said, Your Majesty, there's no movement from those Kiliacosm sovereigns. Are you sure there's no movement at all? I've been paying attention to the 9-4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, but unfortunately, there's still no movement from them. Lin Feng frowned. There was no movement from the 9-4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns. This was a little unusual. If it were Lin Feng, if it were one of these 9-4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, he would actually be facing a lot of pressure as well. How could there be no movement at all? There must be something strange about it. Suddenly, the Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic seemed to have received some news. He said with a strange expression, Your Majesty, Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity of the Nebula Dojo requests an audience. The Nebula Dojo? Lin Feng came to a realization. He seemed to have neglected something. Now that he heard the name of the Nebula Dojo, he immediately thought of the key point. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. This was why the 9-4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns had not moved at all. They must have contacted Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula, and he should have stepped forward. This should be why Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity was here this time. All right, let's go and see what solution Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula has come up with. Invite Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity to the dojo. Lin Feng waved his hand and stood up as well. He left the secret chamber, preparing to meet Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity. Soon, Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity arrived in the hall. Seeing the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign sitting at the top of the hall, even Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity nodded slightly to express his respect. Greetings, Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. Lin Feng was a 4 Cataclysm hegemon. Even if Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity was a pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign of the 5 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign, and his status was extraordinary, he was still insignificant before a 4 Cataclysm hegemon. Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity, please take a seat. What brings you here, Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity? Lin Feng gestured with a hand and stared at Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity. Even Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity felt a lot of pressure. After all, he was facing the famous 4 Cataclysm hegemon, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, who had been at the height of his reputation recently. Your Majesty the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, I'm under the orders of His Majesty the Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. I specially represent the 9-4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns to give the Chaos Dojo 10 small Kiliacosms. I hope Your Majesty will accept them. Huh? What is the meaning of giving me 10 small Kiliacosms? Lin Feng's expression turned cold, and his tone became slightly frigid. Your Majesty, the 9 Kiliacosm sovereigns might have had some misunderstandings with Your Majesty previously. Our Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula is willing to be the peacemaker. I hope Your Majesty the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign can let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones? I have no choice but to respect Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. How about this? Since Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula has mentioned the misunderstanding, I'll talk about it properly. I was the one who killed Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, and in a life-or-death situation at that. I almost died at the hands of Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold. Since Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold is dead, the Imperial Gold Dojo and the small Kiliacosms he left behind naturally belong to me. As long as Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula and the other 9 Kiliacosm sovereigns return the small Kiliacosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo they were managing on my behalf to the Imperial Gold Dojo, I'll let bygones be bygones. How about that? The expression of the Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity froze, and his expression was very dark. This was not just the face of the 9-4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, but also the face of Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. If they really returned all of them, not only would their interests be damaged, their reputation would also be damaged. At that time, what authority would the 9 Kiliacosm sovereigns and Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula have to establish themselves in the medium kiliacosm. In fact, if they wanted to divide the small kiliacosms and dojos of some fallen kiliacosm sovereigns in the future, how could they be taken seriously by other kiliacosm sovereigns? The implications were huge. Your Majesty, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, is there really no room for reconciliation in this matter? Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity asked reluctantly. L killed Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold, but the other Kiliacosm sovereigns took advantage of it. How can I be willing to accept it? If it were Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula, how could he be willing? There's no room for negotiation in this matter. If they return what they took, I have nothing to do with the various Kiliacosm sovereigns. If they do not, I'll personally visit them one by one. Lin Feng's words were already a threat. Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity's expression was very dark. Seeing that the matter had fallen through, he immediately stood up and left the Chaos Dojo. On the other hand, Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic said worriedly, Your Majesty, it's the Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula after all, a dignified 5 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign. If he joins forces with the 9 4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns to attack you, it will be troublesome. Troublesome? No way. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula wouldn't do this, because he knows that it's meaningless. I can go anywhere in the river of spacetime. If I can't break the river of spacetime, he can't do anything to me. Unless absolutely necessary, I don't want to make things difficult for a 5 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign either. However, at this point, I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. I killed Kiliacosm Sovereign Imperial Gold. How can I allow others to take advantage? Lin Feng shook his head. There was no room for reconciliation in this matter at all. Moreover, Lin Feng had a bold thought. So what if the 9 4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereigns joined forces? So what if Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula attacked? It would be like sending him a large number of small Kiliacosms. Lin Feng would definitely accept them all with a smile. However, Lin Feng also had to make some preparations. He could not be too careless. I can rope in Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart. At least with Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart guarding the rear, I can rest assured. I'll just give Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart 10% of the small Kiliacosms. Lin Feng was prepared to rope in Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart. When the time came, even 10% of the profits would be extraordinary. It would depend on whether Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyheart was willing to take the risk. What? The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign really doesn't agree. That's right. Not only did the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign not agree, he also said that there's no room for reconciliation in this matter. He doesn't even take Your Majesty the Kiliacosm Sovereign seriously. After Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity returned to the Nebula Dojo and reported everything truthfully to Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula's expression was also very dark. This was the first time he had suffered a setback when facing other Kiliacosm sovereigns after becoming a hegemonial expert. Even when facing other 5 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula had not humbled himself and even took the initiative to befriend them. However, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign did not appreciate it at all. Your Majesty, the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign is so arrogant. What should we do? I didn't want to use that method initially, but we're already caught between a rock and a hard place now. The implications of this matter are huge. It's no longer just a matter of reputation. If we back down this time, our prestige will be tarnished. It won't be so easy to compete for small Kiliacosms next time. Inform the other 9 4 Cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns to make a trip to the Nebula Dojo. At this moment, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula was also furious. A trace of killing intent flashed across his eyes. Many Kiliacosm sovereigns gathered at the Nebula Dojo. A total of 9 4 Cataclysm hegemons were gathered in the Nebula Dojo. They had all received a message from Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula and specially rushed over in their true bodies. Such a gathering was rare. With such a lineup, it was enough to stir up a storm even in the entire medium Kiliacosm. L heard that Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula sent Kiliacosm Sovereign Trinity to the Chaos Dojo to make peace. But the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign actually rejected him. He didn't even respect Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. It's not just a rejection. The Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign even included Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula. He wants us to spit out all the small Kiliacosms of the Imperial Gold Dojo. That's simply too arrogant. He's simply arrogant to the extreme. If we really give in, that would really be a great humiliation. Do you think 9 4-cataclysm hegemons and a 5-cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign like us will be afraid of a mere Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign? Don't be so quick to say that. It would naturally be best if we can coexist in peace. However, it seems like this Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign is extremely ambitious. He doesn't even take Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula seriously. Let's see how Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula deals with it. We can't just sit back and wait for the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign to attack. In the hall of the Nebula Dojo, the 9 4-cataclysm hegemons were usually high and mighty, but at this moment they were also discussing fervently. There was worry and a trace of anger on their faces. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula looked quietly at the 9 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereigns, but his heart was very calm. Even though he was very angry after learning that Lin Feng had rejected his good intentions, he had completely calmed down now. Everyone, I invited the Kiliacosm sovereigns here today to discuss something. The Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign did not accept the solution I proposed previously, and his attitude is very unyielding. Considering the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign's past deeds, he will probably really come to find you. When the time comes, are you confident that you can contend with the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign alone? As soon as Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula finished speaking, everyone immediately fell silent. Contend with him alone? No matter how indignant they were, Deep D01, WN, no Kiliacosm Sovereign dared to underestimate the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. With the current strength of the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, which 4-cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign would dare to say that he could contend with him alone? Hence, many Kiliacosm Sovereigns fell silent. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula, none of us are confident in contending with the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign. That's why we have to rely on you. If you attack, I believe the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign will be nothing much. One of the 4-cataclysm hegemons said slowly. Hence, the gazes of many Kiliacosm sovereigns focused on Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula again. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula swept his gaze across the many Kiliacosm sovereigns. Then, he shook his head and said, Kiliacosm sovereigns, you flatter me. Although I'm a 5-cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign, and I'm ahead of many other Kiliacosm sovereigns, the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign possesses the principle of spacetime. Even if I can suppress it, it'll be very difficult to kill him. Forget about me, even a 6-cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign probably won't be able to kill the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. No one can do anything to him unless they can find a method that can counter the Kiliacosm sovereign. The many Kiliacosm sovereigns were not disappointed. They were all 4-cataclysm hegemons. How could they not know the actual situation? Even if Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula attacked, he could not kill the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. Once the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign escaped, the consequences would be unthinkable. After all, it was impossible for many Kiliacosm sovereigns to stay together forever. If anyone was alone, it would be very dangerous. However, finding a way to counter Lin Feng's principle of spacetime was easier said than done. Everyone, think of ways to counter the principle of spacetime, or ways to kill the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign completely. With that, Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula closed his eyes and allowed these Kiliacosm sovereigns to discuss. However, after many Kiliacosm sovereigns thought hard for a long time, no one could think of a solution. The principle of spacetime was a supreme rule that transcended everything, and was above all rules. It was rumored that only by becoming the medium Kiliacosm sovereign could one come into some contact with spacetime. As for now, even high-level Kiliacosm sovereigns had no way to effectively counter the principle of spacetime. If they could not counter the principle of spacetime, there was nothing they could do to the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. The initiative was all in the hands of the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula, none of us can do anything. You're the ancient 5-cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. You must have a way. That's right. Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula must have a way to deal with the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign. As long as Kiliacosm Sovereign Nebula commands, We will naturally obey your orders. Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula, feel free to instruct us regarding the matter of dealing with the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. The many Kiliakosm Sovereigns were all hegemons, but now they were helpless. They could only place their hopes on Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula. Swoosh! Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula opened his eyes. If I can think of a way, will you really do everything you can to deal with the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign? Hearing Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula's words, the expressions of many hegemons perked up. It seemed like Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula really had a solution. Of course, as long as we're not in too much danger, we're naturally willing to do everything we can to deal with the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. That's right. If Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula has a way, just tell us. We'll definitely help with all we can. The Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign has gone too far. If Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula really has a solution, we'll definitely support you. The four Cataclysm hegemons all expressed their willingness to do their best to deal with the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. Seeing the many Kiliakosm Sovereigns express their stance, a smile gradually appeared on Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula's face. Then, he nodded and said, "Very good. Since all the Kiliakosm Sovereigns are willing to help with all you have, I'll tell you the method. Actually, the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign also has a fatal weakness, and that is the small Kiliakosm origin. Without enough small Kiliakosm origin, the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign can forget about surviving the fifth epochal cataclysm. As long as we block most of the channels to obtain the small Kiliakosm origin, even if it's the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, what can he do? Even if we join forces for an epoch and cut off the Chaos Dojo's small Kiliakosms, the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign can't do anything." As Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula explained, the eyes of many Kiliakosm Sovereigns lit up. This method was actually a competition of attrition, and it was an open scheme. It would make even the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign very uncomfortable. Even with the principle of spacetime, he could only preserve his life. If they really fought head-on, the 9 Kiliakosm Sovereigns and Kiliakosm Sovereign Nebula would be more than willing. Once Lin Feng's channels to obtain the small Kiliakosm origin were sealed, how would Lin Feng survive the fifth epochal cataclysm? However, this way they would fight Lin Feng and the Chaos Dojo to the death. Moreover, it would take a long time. During this period of time, any accident could happen. Overall, no one wanted to use this method unless absolutely necessary. For a moment, many hegemons began to ponder. All kinds of thoughts flashed through their minds. They were all weighing the pros and cons of doing this. Was it worth paying such a huge price to deal with the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign? After all, if they targeted the Chaos Dojo for an epoch, the amount of small Kiliakosm origin obtained by the various Kiliakosm Sovereigns would definitely be reduced. At that time, many among them might not be able to survive the fifth epochal cataclysm. The risk is too great. However, while we can't deal with the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, what about a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign? Why don't we join forces and pay a price to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign to attack and kill the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign? Then, won't we be completely free of worries? Suddenly, a 4 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign suggested a solution. A 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign? Everyone was slightly stunned. They knew that it was actually very difficult for a 5 Cataclysm and 6 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign to pose any threat to the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. However, what if it was a 7 Cataclysm Sovereign? That would probably be different. Just like the 4 Cataclysm hegemons, a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign would also undergo a metamorphosis, a qualitative metamorphosis. Once one became a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign, it meant that they could attempt to become a medium Kiliakosm Sovereign. The significance was naturally different. Perhaps the 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign could kill Lin Feng in an instant, preventing Lin Feng from even having the chance to use the river of spacetime. However, how difficult was it to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign? Every 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign basically would not appear. Instead, they would cultivate in seclusion and plunder the small Kiliakosm origin in a frenzy. Once they reached the 7th Cataclysm, they would be preparing to survive the 8th epochal cataclysm at every moment, because it concerned life and death, and whether they could become a medium Kiliakosm sovereign. This was also why 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns were rarely seen in the medium Kiliakosm. Even Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star, who seemed to be somewhat related to Linfeng, had basically never appeared. How great a price must we pay to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? That's right. 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns can already be considered overlords. How can we invite one? Isn't it a little unrealistic to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? It's probably impossible to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign with thousands of small Kiliakosms, right? If we can offer thousands of small Kiliakosms, we might as well give in to the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, even if we lose some face. Why would we need to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? Many hegemonial Kiliakosm sovereigns shook their heads, feeling that it was unlikely for them to invite a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Even if they could not afford the price. Moreover, if the price was too great, they might as well give in to Linfeng and resolve all the problems once and for all. No Kiliakosm sovereign was an idiot. Naturally, they could measure the gains and losses. Although they had joined forces this time not just because they had obtained some faction of the Imperial Gold Dojo, if they had to pay a huge price, they would rather submit to the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign. Perhaps there's no need to pay such a huge price at all. Have you heard of Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star? Hearing Kiliakosm sovereign Nebula's words, some Kiliakosm sovereigns also frowned and said, Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star can barely protect himself now. He has already fought with another 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign in the void. Moreover, can an insane Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star still maintain his rationality? Insane? You underestimate Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star too much. How can Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star go insane? He's only facing the 8th epical cataclysm, and hasn't obtained enough small Kiliakosm origin. Naturally, he needs to go berserk and plunder a large amount of small Kiliakosm origin. However, regardless of how he plunders it, he will inevitably provoke other Kiliakosm sovereigns. No matter how much he plunders from those 5 Cataclysm and 6 Cataclysm sovereigns, it's useless. They can only provoke the 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. The 2 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereigns are indeed fighting, but neither can do anything to the other. Now both parties have stopped fighting. In the past, Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star was very interested in the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign's principle of spacetime. He believes that the principle of spacetime of the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign can help him survive the 8th epical cataclysm. Regardless of whether Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star's idea is very insane, as long as he's interested in the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, it's enough. We just need to invite Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star. I believe Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star will definitely be willing to go. Everyone's eyes lit up. This was indeed a good way to use someone else to do the dirty work. Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star was a dignified 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. In the past, he did not have the time to pay attention to the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, so he had never appeared. However, things were different now. Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star had already reached the end of his rope, and was about to be annihilated. Why would he have any reservations? This is a good idea. If Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star acts, he will definitely succeed. No matter how strong the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign is, how can he be a match for a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? However, there were still some Kiliakosm sovereigns who asked worriedly, what if Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign escapes? He has the principle of spacetime. No one can guarantee that he can really kill Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign. A smile appeared on Kiliakosm sovereign Nebula's lips. If Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign really escapes, he's lucky. His methods are extraordinary. Even a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign can't do anything to him. What's the point of us gathering together? At most, we'll spit out everything we ate or add a bit more to it. What else can we do? Can he really kill us all? Everyone was a little stunned when they heard this. However, on second thought, they all understood. Indeed, if even Kiliakosm sovereign Nonary Star could not do anything to the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign, what was the point of continuing to resist? At most, they would just compensate him a little. To them, inviting Kiliakazam's sovereign nonary star would not cause them much substantial losses. All right, let's do it. Everyone, return to your dojo as soon as possible. Once the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign arrives, inform us immediately. Kiliakazam's sovereign nonary star will definitely appear. Then, it will be time for the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign to meet his death. A smile appeared on Kiliakazam's sovereign nebulous face. He liked the feeling of strategizing and controlling everything behind the scenes very much. Even a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign was just a pawn in his hands. Who said that Kiliakazam sovereigns could not use schemes? On the contrary, Kiliakazam sovereigns also needed schemes. If the schemes were used well, even a 7 Cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign would be a blade in his hand. Moreover, regardless of success or failure, he would not suffer much loss. Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Let's see how you survive this calamity. Kiliakazam's sovereign nebula closed his eyes and began to contact Kiliakazam's sovereign nonary star. In the Chaos Dojo, Lin Feng was receiving a very special guest. Kiliakazam, sovereign monarch? I remember that you were one of the 9 Kiliakazam sovereigns who divided the Imperial Gold Dojo. Shouldn't you be discussing how to deal with me now? Why did you come to the Chaos Dojo instead? Are you preparing to spit out the small Kiliakazams of the Imperial Gold Dojo? Lin Feng did find it very strange. He was already preparing to attack the 9 4 Cataclysm hegemons, but he did not expect Kiliakazam's sovereign monarch to visit him in secret. As for the goal of the Kiliakazam sovereign monarch, Lin Feng could not guess it either. Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign, I was just at the Nebula Dojo, discussing with many Kiliakazam sovereigns how to deal with the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Moreover, it has to be said that Kiliakazam sovereign nebula already has a way to deal with the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign, you and the Chaos Dojo are already in imminent danger. Yet you don't know it. In imminent danger? Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly, and his gaze became sharp. He said in a low voice, Kiliakazam's sovereign monarch, there's no point in exaggerating. Tell me your goal. Kiliakazam's sovereign monarch's expression also turned solemn. He said in a low voice, Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Kiliakazam's sovereign nebula's plan is definitely flawless. You will be in great danger. However, if I have to say it, what I want is very simple. You will let bygones be bygones for the small Kiliakazams of the Imperial Gold Dojo I took. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. How about that? Lin Feng stared intently at the Kiliakazam sovereign monarch. In the end, he still said, as long as the information you disclose is indeed very valuable, I'll let bygones be bygones. All right. I trust the Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign. Kiliakazam sovereign monarch did not consider it for long and agreed readily. Please tell me, what plan does Kiliakazam's sovereign nebula have to deal with me? Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. He had thought of all kinds of possibilities and felt that there was really no need for the various hegemons like Kiliakazam's sovereign nebula to fight him to the death, because there was no chance of winning at all and it was meaningless. Kiliakazam's sovereign nebula's plan amazed many Kiliakazam sovereigns like us. The plan is very simple, and that is to get someone else to do the dirty work. Get someone else to do the dirty work? Who? Kiliakazam sovereign nonary star. Hearing this, Lin Feng's expression changed slightly, and his expression gradually darkened.